Welcome back to our yearly roundup of all the weird news that has happened in 2022. I'm back today with a few more weird tales from the year just past. But just as a reminder, this won't be your usual news roundup, this is strictly the stuff that makes you go, what? As quite frankly, the regular news is far too depressing, so instead we'll be exploring a few weird and wonderful stories that may have not made it into the regular newspaper. Now, that's not to say that these stories don't dally with the dark side, because sometimes they most definitely do. But there's also some light-hearted strangeness as well. But don't worry, if anything is going to be hideously awful, then I'll give you a heads up first. So with the disclaimer out of the way, let's jump in to May. But before we get into our first story, if you are new here, then hi, my name's Nikki, and I make podcasts, videos and TikToks about all sorts of weird stuff. So if you're into that, which I have a sneaking suspicion that you might be, then please hit subscribe so we can hang out together again. And if you're not new here, then welcome back, old fiend. Nice to see you again. Our first story today is yet again like something straight out of 28 Days Later. I know we had a truck crash of unknown disease-carrying monkeys in February, but by May of this year, scientists had engineered rage-infected hamsters. Yes, hamsters. Researchers at Georgia State University embarked on a project to edit the genes of hamsters in order to see if it was possible to manufacture them to be more cooperative with each other. Rather worryingly, hamsters were picked as they're a good match to humans in terms of social interactions and behaviour in their groups. Mice are normally the genetic choice for any experiments like this, but as their societies act differently to ours, hamsters seemed the sensible choice. I'm not entirely sure what this says about us in terms of humans thinking we're top of the food chain, but to be honest, I know I'm quite partial to stuffing far too much food in my cheeks and being nocturnal. Anyway, back to the lab. The experiment the scientists were carrying out was conducted using the highly controversial CRISPR gene editing technology. Now, for those of you who have yet to hear about this potential nightmare fuel, CRISPR, as it's known, which stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats, is, to put it into its simplest form, a type of gene editing which can be used to edit the brain. Twins in China, Lulu and Nana, were the first to be born using this gene editing technique. The two girls were edited so that it's medically impossible for them to contract HIV. According to the scientist who carried out the experiment, He Shangquei, HIV is a big problem in China, so his work was in order to create children which can't spread the virus. The gene editing has received scorn from other scientists who say it goes against their code of ethics, and some believe the scientist involved was disguising his motives, instead trying to engineer people with greater intelligence. It will be years before the genetic engineering results will be revealed on Nana and Lulu, but it's expected that the gene editing they've received will have a direct impact in enhancing their IQ. Anyway, back to the hamsters. The genetic edits the hamsters received at Georgia State were meant to make the creatures less aggressive in social situations, and to make them less social in terms of needing interaction from each other. The gene which makes the hamsters social, elicits them to bond with each other, and also causes their aggression to flare up, is the hormone called vasopressin, and its receptor, AVPR1A. The lead researcher on the study, Professor H. Elliot Albers, said, "We anticipated that if we eliminated vasopressin activity, we would reduce both aggression and social communication. But the opposite happened." When the group of Syrian hamsters were put together in a neutral environment, free of anything which may cause hamsters to become aggressive, such as food, sleeping spots, or toys, they found they instantly fought with one another, using extreme aggression such as biting. Measures were taken to also make sure this was not something which was hormone related, i.e. aggression shown from the opposite sex relating to mating behaviour, so it was only single-sex pairs of hamsters introduced to each other. Both female pairs and male pairs reacted in the same way with each other, unleashing almighty ferocious furry fury on their counterpart when introduced. Professor Albert explained the startling results, saying, even though we know that vasopressin increases social behaviours by acting within a number of brain regions, it's possible that the more global effects of the AVPR1A receptor are inhibitory. We don't understand the system as well as we thought we did. So rather conclusively, it seems as though gene editing isn't as straightforward as first thought, and it's back to the drawing board for the time being. I personally think that gene editing seems like something which can go all so easily wrong and could have absolutely devastating effects, but in terms of it being possible to make humans resistant to certain diseases, I can see the upside in that, particularly when it comes to something congenital. But is it worth it? Time will tell on that one. Let me know your thoughts about this evolutionary branch of science, and if you think it's a good or bad idea to be meddling with it. I'd love to know your thoughts. Our next story heads away from science and into the realms of the paranormal. A woman in New York State was baffled when she received some post which had seemingly time-travelled to her. Carol Hover, who lives in Hornell in New York, was shocked to open her mailbox one day to find a postcard inside which was sent by her mother. The impossible handwritten missive was all the stranger as her mother had died 8 years previously. Even weirder was that this postcard wasn't just something that had been lost since her death. It came from the 1960s. The postcard, which was sent whilst her mother and father were on their honeymoon decades previously in Canada, somehow managed to get sent through the post to her yet-to-be-born daughter's home. It seemed as though the postcard had travelled through time. Carol said she instantly recognised her deceased mother's handwriting when she opened the mailbox and realised that this was such a bizarre coincidence that she had to look into it further. She took the postcard to the post office and told them what had happened, and they were mystified. To try and work out what had happened, they started to narrow down the possibilities. First off, the delivery person had been switched out that day and was a different one, but unless they were Doctor Who doing a temp job, that didn't really have any bearing on what had occurred. Secondly, they then went to check if there was anything in the next day's scheduled delivery, and as it turned out, there were 3 more letters from the past, all from Carol's mother. As if that wasn't strange enough, Carol was then contacted by her cousin Karen, who told her she too had received a mystery postcard from the past. In a post on Facebook, she said, "Has anyone else received postcards from the past recently? This postcard was mailed to my parents from Ireland, sent in 1983, and has arrived at our former family home in Minnesota. Parents sold the house in 1984, and the couple that purchased it still lived there, and luckily they were able to track me down." The Postal Service told Carol they weren't aware of any strange uncovering of lost post which could explain the time-travelling letters, and the fact that these were so spread out across the 60s, 70s and 80s didn't add up as if it was a lost bundle of postcards. Surely they would have not all simultaneously found their way together in the same place to then be posted on. The mystery as to why the postcards turned up at Carol's home was not so difficult to solve. As it turns out, she still lived in the home which belonged to her grandmother, Carol's mum's mum, so these were all addressed to her mother's parents. And well done for processing that timeline. Give yourself a pat on the back. As for the mystery being solved, Carol isn't really interested in getting to the bottom of it, finding the whole event quite comforting. She said, whether it gets explained or not, I'm okay with that. So, what do we reckon on this one? Is it ghost post or just a mix-up with the mail? Let me know your thoughts. Now for our final story. Have you ever wanted to live in a haunted house? Well, in May, a house went on the market that is sure to chill you to the core, and it's also guaranteed to come equipped with its own ghost. The The Rhode Island home was the setting for an investigation carried out by the infamous ghost botherers Ed and Lorraine Warren. The house, now known as the Conjuring house after the film made in 2013 about this very place, was put on the market by Sotheby's for a whopping $1.5 million. The property, which was bought in 2019 and subsequently turned into a museum toward the events which allegedly happened there to the Perron family, was put on the market in May 2022 and was instantly snapped up. The piece of American history was purchased by real estate developer and paranormal enthusiast Jacqueline Nunez, but the sale had a caveat. As the previous owners had bought the property after the site had been sold after too many people were bothering the previous vendors, they said that the new owner had to preserve the paranormal history of the site and to keep it as somewhat of a museum. Jacqueline promised to abide to the rules, and as well as buying the property, she also bought the business. The home is available to visit during the day, ghost hunting overnight for as little as $960, and if you're feeling brave enough, you can even partake in a séance at the house. Personally, I think the price tag is a little steep for the overnight stay, but I understand that Jacqueline has to pay that mortgage somehow, and hopefully she's giving some of that money to the ghosts as an appearance fee, if they ever turn up. Thanks for joining me for that selection of weird stories. I hope you enjoyed them, and if you did, there'll be more along soon, so make sure you're subscribed if you're not already to keep up with the series. If you're enjoying this weird news roundup and what I make in general, and you want it to continue, then please consider becoming a Patreon supporter like our executive Patreon producers, Amy, Christina, Jess, Kate, Karen, Kevin, Mary, Sally, Sam, Sarah and Veronica. And huge thanks to all my other Patreon supporters too. If you're feeling generous and you just want to send a tip or a little Christmas gift from my Amazon wishlist, then I would massively and hugely appreciate that, and I'll leave all the links of how to do that in the description. An enormous thank you for even considering doing any of those things, as it means the world when I get notifications like that or a surprise parcel through the post. So big squishes from me if you're part of that gang. You're the absolute bestest. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I've been Nikki Druce, and I'll see you ghouls next time for June.